start it up. I'm just going to point out that our moderator for this panel is the only curator of both of these exhibitions. So Andy worked with me and Terry Capsalis on the exhibition upstairs, Pathways to Unknown Worlds, and we also worked with Huey Copeland on the exhibition here downstairs. So it's quite a
Just to get it out of the way so I don't forget, I will also introduce right next to me is Glenn Ligon, who is an artist. If you happen to be in Pittsburgh before the end of the year, he has a great retrospective that's up at the Andy Warhol Museum. And then the show travels at the end of January to the Lexington Center in Columbus, which is only 6 hours away. Pleasant drive, even in the winter. And if you don't make it to the show, the book's good too. The show is called Some Changes. It was organized by the Power Plant Museum up in Toronto. And then at the end is Malik Gaines. He's a writer and performer based in LA. He's written about art and culture for numerous publications and exhibition catalogs. Gaines performs with the group My Barbarian and is currently a lecturer in critical studies at the California Institute of the Arts. And with that, try to begin. I'm taking my watch off so you know I'm serious. Okay. I'll have to begin by saying that it's funny up here speaking because the name of this panel is Art After Ra, and one, the show that Huey and I organized is all around, so it's sort of proof enough. Here's Art After Ra as I see it, at least. Secondly, I'll have to say it's because really the weasel and my comrade, the co-curator Huey, should be up here taking the blame and the heat with me, but he's in the back. He's smarter. The first item worth noting, I think, on this topic and within the show is that as we contacted people for the show, it was pretty amazing the number of people who responded. I don't think my work shows any influence from Sun Ra, but I was sure taken with them, and I'd love to be in the show. And quite a number of those actually replaced love with have. And it struck me like I wasn't sure if you'd get a similar response putting together a show on other influences, particularly from the music world. I really doubted it. And so, as a friend of mine said about his own shows, this exhibition, aesthetically, is a touch promiscuous. Huey and I thought it was important for the show to be not too referential to its source, and that it should embrace Ra to the same levels, from religious to irresponsible, that the artists themselves have embraced his message, I guess we should say. So, none of my following notes will add up, and hopefully they shouldn't, and mostly I will let other artists speak. A recent published interviewer. Rock and roll or funk? Christopher Wolfe. Funk or jazz? This is for me the ultimate artistic question. Christopher Wolfe in the Silk Screen. Any interview with Christopher Wolfe shows moments of these pithy retorts, clearly aligned with some of the strong-headed and counter statements Ra was so good at in any interview situation. Now, one of my esteemed cohorts up here, Glenn, and since I'm embarrassed to sit here next to these two panelists, hopefully I'll embarrass him as well, said in a recently published conversation, quote, "There's a lot of interest in Sun Ra at the moment, as a representative of a strain of Afrofuturism, and perhaps because of his connection stylistically with later groups, like Parliament, Funkadelic, or Bootsy Collins. I think younger artists haven't dug deep into Ra's critique of American society. Those full Egyptian spaceman costumes are not just about spectacle, although they make for fantastic spectacle. They're also about using a mythic past and the notion of the alien visitor to question the very category of human, particularly as it relates to a people historically considered on the margins of what was considered human." I'll also say that this is one of Glenn's paintings, for some reference. So what makes you a being? And if Ra is having a slow and steady influence on the visual art of today, it is in part, I think, because the dialogue about identities and existence seems to have deteriorated in complexity a little bit over the last 10 years, particularly in object making. So I think a lot of artists are looking back to Ra and hoping to find a more complicated rag from which to bring out these materials. In the words of Camille Normand, another artist who is unfortunately not in the show, but who wrote for the catalog for the Pathways show. Quote, today's emergent information technologies afford many the possibility of experiencing life through multiple projected identities. Online, these personalities, or identities, are referred to as avatars, online identities, virtual selves, etc., and are often utilized to live lives that the physical body can never attain, like instantaneous gender and age swapping, and other experiential transformations of identity. In these projections of desires from the conscious and the unconscious, the projected self may rise in power and seek to take over the embodied user as the primary identity. At other times, these projected personalities almost physically manifest themselves, the classic doppelganger, praying with a will of their own, demanding at the very least to be acknowledged, never forgotten. The creator of Sun Ra may have been haunted by history, but he grabbed control of his story. Sun Ra walked amongst us, more than a virtual personality, no shadowing ghost, no doppelganger, but the very incarnation of an avatar. End quote. I'll read another statement by one of Huey's and my great regrets for not being in the show, David Hammonds, and first slide, just to show an example of his work. I hate mentioning people when you don't know what they do. This is a still from a video. Interviewer asks, how does the question of race affect the reading of your work and the scope of its development? David Hammonds. I'm trying to get away with the redundancy of being African American or making African American art. It's like a double negative, a double noun. So I'm trying to figure it out. Everyone knows that I am black, so my work doesn't have to shout it anymore. I've been doing this stuff long enough. So I'm trying to hide it. Hide the blackness in the culture as deeply as possible. But it's there. It's like listening to Sun Ra's music. It's so beyond blackness. It's so beyond whiteness. It's just beyond all of us. That's beautiful. If I can get to that space, if I can get to that space, if I decide to let loose some of this baggage, this cultural baggage that I've got to get rid of it if I want to grow, because I'm not going to get trapped into making cultural statements. End quote. This push against categories, against definition, in a way, with this artwork and with artists that have taken from Sun Ra, but not necessarily taken referentially from it, I think we can see a way that even distortion, disrespect, and dismemberment of an idea is a form of saying that these thoughts still matter, that these thoughts still affect our words. Mike Kelly, in the essay Myth Science, which is an essay on the Swedish artist Ellen Foster. I guess I got ahead of myself. Next slide, I want to show two examples of habits. And this is a slide of a piece he did in Barron called Blues of the Abstract Truth, which was titled after Oliver Nelson and Elms on Impulse from the 60s. So Kelly is writing an essay, Myth Science, on the Swedish artist Ellen Foster, who did a lot of printed ephemera. This is two sides of one of his prints. Kelly ends his essay with a postscript. Quote, I have long commingled Falström's and Sun Ra's works in my mind. I discovered them both about the same time and see many similarities between them. Both believe in synthesis, in complexity over simplicity. Both have a disregard for signature style, and both proclaim the importance of art as a force for changing consciousness and the world. Both believe that you should not talk down to your audience, yet both use popular modes of address that are radically transformed, perverted you might say, to get their points across. To borrow a Sun Ra term, they are both myth scientists of the highest caliber. End quote. And then go forward. This is another printed